I'm Molly Kimball. Welcome to Fueled, a wellness and nutrition podcast. I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition journalist with a passion to help people live their strongest, healthiest life possible. In my weekly TV segments and columns, there's a limited amount of time and space to cover everything, but there's so much more to share. This podcast is my opportunity to dive deeper into the topics you want to know about. Today, we are talking all things protein supplements, and in particular, protein powders. There's a lot of question when it comes to protein powders, especially questions like which ones are best, which ones taste the best, and the biggest of all, do we even need them? So personally, I do like protein powders. I know a lot of people don't, but I like them, and I do incorporate them into my regular routine. I use a variety of different types of protein supplements, but especially protein powder. I like how versatile it is. I'll sometimes blend it with berries and unsweetened almond milk for a fruity smoothie, or I'll do something like a frozen blended coffee drink using, again, unsweetened almond milk or coconut milk with a coffee concentrate and use that as like an afternoon pick-me-up. I will turn to protein bars if I'm on the go and I haven't really planned ahead well, but my preference for a protein supplement is a powder because it's more versatile. And it also has the best ratio of protein to carbs or calories, meaning you get a lot more bang for your buck when it comes to protein versus carbs or calories. But before we dive in, let's start by acknowledging that we don't actually need protein supplements of any type. We can absolutely 100% achieve our daily protein goals with real, whole, unprocessed foods. So if you're not a big fan of protein fortified foods and drinks like protein powders, don't worry, because there's nothing that is specifically or magically nutritious or health promoting about these products. Instead, think about protein supplements as exactly what their name says. They are supplements to an otherwise healthful diet that also incorporates a variety of natural protein sources. So to hopefully clear up some of the confusion you may have about protein powders, here's a rundown, first of all, of how much protein do we even need, and then we'll get into the different types of protein powders and some of my favorite picks. So when we look at how much protein we need, I typically look at it based on our body weight and specifically our healthy or goal or ideal body weight. And when we look at weight, aiming for at least half of a gram of protein per pound of body weight as an absolute minimum, up to 1 gram of protein per pound of healthy body weight. So for example, if someone is 150 pounds, the low end I would look at is 75 grams of protein, up to about 150 grams of protein for that person who's 150 pounds. Again, half a gram of protein is the very low end that I would recommend. I would really look closer at 0.75 or 3/4 of a gram of protein per pound of body weight. But for the ease of just kind of listening and hearing those numbers, half of a gram up to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, again, with that half a pound being the really low edge. So to help put that number in perspective, for the 150-pound person who's looking for 75 to 150 grams of protein, a typical serving of protein powder ranges from about 15 to 30 grams of protein. So it's really just making it easier and more convenient for us to reach these daily protein goals. A 4-ounce chicken breast, for example, also has about 30 grams of protein to also help to put those numbers into perspective. And again, there's a lot of different types of protein supplements, but protein powder is typically the most efficient source of protein in terms of carbs and calories, meaning we get the most bang for our buck. If we're looking at minimizing our carbs, minimizing our calories, we still get a lot of protein when we're using that supplement. So protein powders, they're incredibly versatile. We can blend them into shakes, smoothies, frozen coffee drinks, as I mentioned earlier. Protein powder can also be added to baked goods. So if you're making like healthy whole grain waffles or pancakes or making them with something like almond flour, coconut flour, we can easily add protein to these. We can also add protein to something like milk or unsweetened almond milk and stir it into oatmeal or pour it over our whole grain breakfast cereal, because oatmeal and cereal, typically really low protein, but that protein powder is a way that we can boost that protein to those carb-rich breakfasts. And one big function of protein powder that a lot of people aren't aware of is that it can actually lend structure and texture to baked goods, in particular gluten-free baked goods. And so normally if we're doing gluten-free baking with things like almond flour or coconut flour, if you don't add something that kind of takes the place or mimics gluten, you'll end up with a dry, crumbly mess. So if you've been making almond flour, coconut flour, cookies, cakes, whatever, and you have all these air pockets and it's crumbling all over the place, add something. Usually the things that are added is xanthan gum. It's Xanthan, xanthan gum. About a quarter teaspoon is often used in a normal batch of something like almond flour cookies or brownies to mimic the effect of gluten. And what that means is it gives that structure, that function, that texture, so that it kind of holds it together. And whey protein can also be used. So it doesn't have quite as strong an effect as xanthan gum, but it does have an impact. So adding whey protein to gluten-free baked goods not only helps boost the protein, and it could be other types of protein, not just whey protein. Whey has a very neutral taste, but you could also use plant-based. Not only does it boost the protein, but it also helps to give that structure, that texture. But when we're looking at the shelves at supplement stores, health food stores, the number of protein powder options can be absolutely overwhelming. There's so many different brands. And then even within those different brands, there's so many different types of products. And a lot of the names really look the same. And they all are marketing themselves as if they're healthy for us. So it's really hard to tell what's truly going to be best for us. So the most important consideration, if you're looking at scanning the shelves or looking online, the most important consideration is going to be, do you like it? And fortunately, a lot of brands are sold in little small single-serve packets, which is not at all cost-effective to use in the long run. You're paying for the convenience of these little single-serve portions, but they really make it easy to try it out before you commit to a whole canister of that product. And ask your store about the return policy. So some health food or wellness type grocery stores and also some supplement stores allow us to return even a protein powder that's been opened, usually just for a store credit or an exchange, but as long as we have the refund. So ask about that too if you aren't able to try it in a little packet before you buy it. If you're ideally buying from a store that lets you return it, it kind of helps with that as well. So then that brings us to the question of what type of protein is best for you. So here's a quick overview of 3 main categories of protein powders. And there's a lot more than this, but the main ones that you'll see in stores are whey protein, plant-based protein, and also casein. Casein is not very common in stores, but it is one that I really like, and we'll talk about why in just a minute. So whey protein, casein protein, both of those are milk-based, and then also plant-based proteins, the 3 main categories that we'll be talking about. And again, this summary really just skims the surface of protein powders, but at least it can help to point you in the best direction to help meet your goals. So when you're also looking at within these types of proteins, whey, casein, or plant-based, and you turn it over and you turn the canister over, you're looking at the ingredient list. Sometimes it'll tell you right on the front too, the type of protein. You'll see words like protein isolate or protein concentrate or protein hydrolysate. And for the most part, if you're just trying to get more protein into your diet, you're sitting at a desk most of the day, you're in your car, you're commuting, and your body is not your life. You're not a professional athlete. You're not a bodybuilder. You're not relying on your body for your income, and you're just trying to get more protein in your diet. It doesn't really matter that much. And what I would look at is more of, what do you like the taste of that you're going to use, what fits price-wise into your budget. But when we look at the difference between those types, protein isolate, concentrate, and hydrolysate, there is a difference. The protein isolates are a purer source of that protein. They contain at least 90% protein. So when you're looking at what's going to be a high quality, very easily digested and absorbed type of protein, that's going to be your protein isolates. Protein concentrates typically contain a little bit less protein, about 70 to 90%, with a little bit more carbs and fat. And protein hydrolysate means that it's processed to break down the longer protein chains into smaller fragments, making it an even purer form of protein. So that's kind of what you'll see on the label. So if you do see a concentrate, you'll see that oftentimes that is less pricey. Again, making it a little bit less effective, probably absorbed a little bit less efficiently. However, the price point for people can make a really big difference there. So whey protein is actually a milk protein, and it is quickly and easily digested and absorbed by our bodies. So this makes it a really great option for pre and post-workout fueling, because if we're doing whey protein in a shake, for example, either right before or right after a workout, it's entering our muscle cells faster than some of these that are going to be slower absorbed. And both whey isolate and whey hydrolysate are really low in lactose. So even if someone has lactose intolerance, they can often still use whey protein when it's in the form of isolate and hydrolysate. Casein, on the other hand, that is also still a milk-based protein, but it is a much slower digesting protein. So what this means is there's a slow, steady release of amino acids when we take in casein-based protein powder. I like to use casein before bedtime to help minimize muscle losses through the night. So inevitably, while we sleep, there's just a natural catabolic reaction, a natural breakdown that happens in all of us that we do lose slight amounts of muscle through the night, just part of that overnight fast. So adding that source of casein at night can help to minimize these losses that naturally can happen. We can use casein anytime through the day, though, but I do like it especially at night. What I find is it's also really good if someone is trying to drop body fat, they're cutting their carbs, they're cutting back, and they're trying to kind of keep things in check nutritionally. They may find that they're waking up and they're not quite full when they go to sleep, and they're not quite satisfied, and it can interfere with their sleep, quite frankly. So adding something like a casein protein shake at night can really be good to help, again, minimize that muscle loss, help to prevent someone from waking up hungry through the night, and also help us to not wake up feeling ravenous in the morning as well. So that's my top use for casein. Casein is also really rich in things like cottage cheese. So again, if you're not a protein powder person, but you would use cottage cheese at night, same thing. And then finally, we've got plant-based proteins. And this category in supplement stores and in the whole supplement market has just really exploded over the past few years. So years ago, if you wanted what was considered a plant-based protein, not whey, not casein, you had to do soy protein, and they were gritty. They didn't taste very good. They didn't dissolve very good. And most people didn't like them at all. And even the ones that came out kind of that first generation of pea protein, hemp protein, were just really chalky. And you could tell a difference that when you blended it with a protein shake, a lot of people just didn't like it as much. They have come a long, long way. So they dissolve a lot better and taste a lot better than the plant protein powders that first came out. So if you tried them years ago, hated them, try them now. Many of them, and I would actually say most of them, are also now soy-free. And so they're plant-based, they're vegan, they're dairy-free, they're also soy-free. So they're great options for people who have different types of food sensitivities, food intolerances, food allergies. So I really like the plant-based proteins for these. So what you'll see a lot of times is a blend, and it'll be a blend of different types of protein sources like hemp, brown rice, quinoa, pea protein. And things like brown rice or quinoa are actually really high in carb, but the protein is extracted from these and isolated from these to create these protein powders. And so you'll see some that are just a pure hemp protein or a pure pea protein, but more often than not, you're seeing a bunch of different blends. And that's my preference as far as taste, texture, flavor are the ones that are the blends. So it's up to you and kind of how you're using it, also your food preferences, and if you're choosing to go more plant-based or vegan versus a milk-based protein. But that's kind of the rundown of the main ones that are going to be out there: your whey protein, your casein protein, or your plant-based proteins. So once you decide, okay, which of these is going to be a better fit, the next thing is, what are you looking at in terms of the label? So turning it over and making sure that it doesn't have more than about 3 or 4 grams of sugar at the most for about 20 grams of protein. And most of these will have 15 to 20 up to 30 grams of protein. The calories typically might be about 80 to 120 calories. Carbs usually aren't very high. And some of the plant-based ones, the carbs are a little bit higher, but the fiber is also higher. So that's not a bad thing. Just make sure you're not getting, again, more than about 3 or 4 grams of sugar for every 20 grams of protein. So here's a look at my top picks for all the different types of protein powders. When it comes to plant-based proteins, this is the one that I probably use the most. And there's so many options out there, but a few of my favorites. One is Orgain. There's a lot of varieties of the Orgain protein powders, and I like them all, especially their plant-based protein. Sun Warrior has one called Fit and Lean. Their Protein Classic Plus specifically, I really like the way that one tastes the best of all of their product line. Amazing Grass also has a protein and kale blend that is great. It's got basically a serving of greens also in your protein. The downside on that is I don't like it blended with my coffee drink for obvious reasons, because it's like green juice mixed with my coffee. So it doesn't have as much versatility there, but I really like the nutrient punch that's in there with the kale and that full serving of greens, also in that serving of protein powder. So for plant-based proteins, I really like Orgain. I like Sun Warrior, specifically the Fit and Lean Protein Classic Plus, and then also the Amazing Grass protein and kale. Then for casein, there's a lot of options out there that are artificially sweetened. And that's actually something I didn't mention. When you're looking at product labels, as much as possible, look for those that do not contain artificial sweeteners. And when we're looking at artificial sweeteners, that's going to be aspartame, which is equal, sucralose, which is Splenda. You'll also see one that says asulfame potassium, and that's what's in products like Coke Zero. So those three are typically going to be the most common artificial sweeteners. And if you see those in your protein powders, I would look for a different option. So again, avoiding sucralose, aspartame, and asulfame potassium. So with that in mind, with casein, the ones that I see in stores often are artificially sweetened, but I really like the one by Optimum Nutrition. It's called Optimum Nutrition Naturally Flavored 100% Casein. For whey protein, just my favorite for years has been the Designer Whey Natural. They have vanilla, chocolate, a whole bunch of different flavors, but I really like that one. It's a whey protein concentrate, and it is a really great price point, and dissolves, tastes really good. And so it's a very neutral product for someone who might not be very familiar, or, is kind of just starting to experiment with different protein powders. When it comes to the whey protein isolate, that higher percent of protein in there, I like the Isopure Natural. And then finally, one that we didn't talk about yet, but that's collagen protein. So we've done an entire podcast episode before on the health benefits of collagen. And collagen is an entire category of protein on its own as well. So there's two brands that are the most common. The one that you see in stores the most is Vital Proteins, their collagen peptides line. And I love that product. Another that's been around for years and years and years is Great Lakes Collagen Hydrolysate. There's several different types. I like the one in the green can. It dissolves the best. I've only found that on Amazon, but it's also a really great price point. And then finally, there's another entire category of protein that we haven't talked about that's drinkable, and it's the ready-to-drink protein drinks. So this is basically protein powder that's already been mixed up for us. And so there's two main benefits of a ready-to-drink protein drink compared to protein powder, and also two main drawbacks. So the benefits are the work's already been done for us, which is why they're ready to drink. So it's more convenient than ever to sip your protein pre or post workout, add it to your coffee, cereal, oatmeal. You don't have to do the mixing part. And unlike most protein powders, another benefit of the ready-to-drink protein drinks is that they usually have a lot of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, calcium, which is fantastic for if you're losing a lot of electrolytes through sweat. So we don't get those with the protein powder, but the ready-to-drink protein drinks are rich in electrolytes. So benefits, they're already mixed. They're also electrolyte rich. However, the drawbacks of many ready-to-drink protein drinks is that they have either added sugars or artificial sweeteners. They also have thickeners, stabilizers, so that they're basically held in suspension while they're sitting on the shelf or sitting in the cooler for weeks or months or whatever it might be. So if you were to mix your protein powder with unsweetened almond milk, let it sit out on the counter or even in the fridge, it would completely settle out. And so instead, Many of these do add the stabilizers, the thickeners. So while they're more convenient to grab out of our fridge, they're typically less portable or convenient for our gym bag because once we put more than 1 or 2 bottles in there, it can quickly weigh down our bags. And also they're, of course, immediately a no-go for airport security for any type of carry-on if you're traveling and trying to bring your protein supplements. But when it comes to the grab and go ready to drink protein drinks, I do have 2 favorite picks. One is Iconic, and it is a grass-fed milk protein. I actually worked with them to develop the original formula years ago. They were originally based out of New Orleans. They've since moved to the West Coast. But I love this. It's a grass-fed milk protein, low sugar. It's also lactose-free. There's also Orgain. It's a plant-based protein shake, vegan, zero sugar, lactose-free. So there are a couple of picks that have no artificial sweetener and they're not high sugar and have all natural ingredients. So those are my 2 picks there. So that's kind of a rundown of plant proteins, casein, several different types of whey proteins, your concentrate and your isolate, and then your collagen protein. So which ones are best to use when, what to look for on the labels, and then also some of my top picks as far as brands are concerned. So I hope this helped to answer some of your questions about protein powders. I realize that it may have also triggered some new questions that maybe you didn't even know you had before. So you can always email me, molly@mollykimball.com, with any of your questions. And often your questions are what give me the ideas for the new podcast episodes that we do. So I'm Molly Kimball, and you have been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition content, head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life possible.